The morning sun cast long shadows across downtown Seattle's busy intersection when 17-year-old Maya spotted the elderly man with the white cane stepping directly into oncoming traffic. She didn't hesitate, her worn sneakers slapping against wet pavement as she lunged forward, grabbing his arm, just as a delivery truck roared past where he would have been standing. What she didn't know was that this blind stranger carried a secret that would shatter everything she thought she knew about wealth, loss, and the true meaning of family. She didn't know that his weathered hands had once signed billion-dollar deals, or that his gentle voice had commanded boardrooms across 3 continents. She didn't know that this moment would be the beginning of the most extraordinary friendship of her life. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Maya Rodriguez had been living on the streets of Seattle for 8 months, ever since the foster system had failed her one final time on her 17th birthday. Her cardboard shelter, tucked beneath the overpass near Pike Place Market, offered little protection from the Pacific Northwest's relentless drizzle. But it was better than the last group home where the older kids had stolen her few possessions and the staff had looked the other way. She had learned to survive on her own, scraping together enough money from odd jobs and the occasional generous passerby to keep herself fed, though barely. The intersection of 3rd Avenue and Pine Street buzzed with its usual morning chaos when Maya noticed the man. He stood at the crosswalk, his white cane tapping rhythmically against the concrete as he waited for the light to change. Everything about him suggested careful precision, from the way he held his shoulders straight despite his obvious age, to the methodical sweep of his cane. His clothes were clean but not expensive, a simple wool coat over dark slacks, and his silver hair was neatly combed despite the morning's light rain. Maya watched from her usual spot near the corner coffee shop, where the owner sometimes let her sweep the sidewalk in exchange for a die-old pastry. She had developed an eye for reading people during her months on the street, categorizing them into those who might help, those who would ignore her, and those who posed danger. This man fell into none of those categories. There was something different about him, a quiet dignity that seemed to create a bubble of calm around him even as the city rushed past. The pedestrian signal changed, its electronic chirping cutting through the traffic noise, and the man began to cross. Maya continued watching, something nagging at her attention. Then she saw it, the delivery truck barreling down 3rd Avenue, its driver clearly distracted by something in his cab, not slowing for the intersection despite the red light. The man with the cane was walking directly into the truck's path, his measured steps carrying him steadily toward disaster. Maya didn't think. Instinct, born from months of looking out for herself on dangerous streets, propelled her forward. Her worn sneakers found purchase on the wet pavement as she sprinted toward the intersection, her heart hammering against her ribs. The truck's engine grew louder, its driver still oblivious to the red light or the pedestrian in his path. Maya reached the man just as the truck's bumper would have struck him, her small frame colliding with his larger one as she wrapped her arms around his waist and pulled him backward onto the sidewalk. The truck roared past, its driver finally noticing the red light and slamming on his brakes 50 feet too late. The screech of tires on wet asphalt filled the air, followed by angry honking from the cars behind. Maya and the man tumbled together onto the concrete, both breathing heavily as the reality of what had almost happened settled over them. "Are you hurt?" Maya asked, scrambling to her feet and helping the man sit up. His white cane had scattered several feet away, and she quickly retrieved it, placing it in his hands. Up close, she could see the man more clearly. His face was lined with age, but not hardened by it, and his sightless eyes, a pale blue behind wire-rimmed glasses, seemed to look right through her with unsettling perception. "I'm fine, thanks to you," he said, his voice carrying a slight tremor that might have been shock or emotion. That was incredibly brave, and incredibly foolish. You could have been hurt too. His accent held traces of somewhere else, perhaps the East Coast, cultured but not pretentious. Maya shrugged, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. Her clothes were clean, she made sure of that, but they were obviously second-hand and showed signs of hard wear. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days, and she knew her face probably showed the thinness that came from irregular meals. "It's okay," she said. "I mean, anyone would have done the same thing. The man struggled to his feet, declining Maya's offered help with a gentle shake of his head. Once standing, he was taller than she had expected, probably over 6 feet, and despite his age carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "I'm afraid experience has taught me that not everyone would have acted as you did. May I ask your name?" "Maya," she replied, then hesitated. Most adults, when they learned she was homeless, either tried to call social services or hurried away as if poverty might be contagious. Something about this man made her think he might be different, but she had been wrong about adults before. "Maya," he repeated, as if testing the sound. "A beautiful name. I'm Robert Chen, and I find myself considerably in your debt." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a worn leather wallet. "Please, let me give you something for your trouble." Maya stepped back instinctively. "I don't want money. I mean, I wasn't doing it for money. The truck was going to hit you." Robert paused, his wallet half open. In the months since he had lost his sight, he had grown adept at reading voices, and something in Maya's tone told him more than her words. There was pride there, but also hunger, both literal and metaphorical. This girl was surviving on her own, and surviving hard. "Of course," he said, returning the wallet to his pocket. "Forgive me, I didn't mean to offend." He tilted his head slightly, listening to the sounds around them. "Tell me, Maya, do you know this area well? I'm afraid I'm still learning to navigate these streets, and I seem to have gotten turned around." It was a lie. Gentle, but deliberate. Robert had been walking these same streets for 6 months, ever since he had given up his penthouse apartment and most of his possessions. He knew exactly where he was and where he was going. But something about this girl who had risked her own safety for a stranger made him reluctant to simply walk away. Maya glanced around, recognizing the deflection for what it was but choosing to play along. "Where are you trying to get to?" "There's a small diner a few blocks from here, Murphy's. I sometimes have breakfast there." Another lie. Robert rarely ate breakfast anymore, his appetite having diminished along with most of his other pleasures in life. But Murphy's was real, and it was warm, and something told him this girl could use both food and warmth. "I know where that is," Maya said. "I could show you, if you want. I mean, if you're not in a hurry." Robert smiled, the first genuine smile that had crossed his face in weeks. "I would be grateful for the company." They walked slowly, Robert's cane tapping a steady rhythm as Maya matched her pace to his. The morning rush hour was beginning to intensify around them, streams of coffee-clutching commuters flowing toward downtown office buildings. Maya found herself studying Robert as they walked, noting details that hadn't been apparent during their brief encounter at the intersection. His clothes, while not expensive, were well-made and carefully maintained. His shoes were leather, polished but showing honest wear. His hands, gripping the white cane, were clean and soft, not the hands of someone who worked manual labor, but they bore small scars and calluses that spoke of recent change. Most intriguingly, he wore no jewelry except for a thin gold band on his right ring finger, worn smooth with age and handling. "Have you lived in Seattle long?" Robert asked as they paused at another intersection, this one with a properly functioning traffic signal. "About 8 months, Maya replied carefully. "What about you?" 6 months. I moved here from New York after—" He paused, and Maya heard something heavy in that pause, a weight of unfinished sentences and untold stories. "After some changes in my life." Maya nodded, understanding the language of incomplete explanations. She had her own collection of sentences that ended in ellipses, stories she wasn't ready to tell strangers, no matter how kind they seemed. Murphy's Diner occupied the ground floor of a brick building that had probably been elegant once, before decades of urban wear had given it a comfortable shabbiness. The neon sign in the window flickered erratically, and the smell of bacon and coffee drifted out every time the door opened. Maya had walked past it countless times but never been inside, the prices in the window placing it firmly in the category of places where she didn't belong. Robert navigated the door with practiced ease, and Maya followed, immediately struck by the diner's warmth and the clatter of conversation and cooking. The interior was pure Americana, red vinyl booths and black and white checkered floors, framed photographs of Seattle's past covering every available wall space. A handful of customers sat scattered throughout the dining room, mostly older folks who looked like regulars. "Robert," called a voice from behind the counter. A woman in her 50s, her graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and her apron stained with the honest marks of the working cook, waved at them. "Your usual table's open." Robert smiled and raised his hand in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Diane. I have a guest today." Diane's eyes shifted to Maya, taking in her appearance with the practiced assessment of someone who had spent decades in the service industry. Her expression softened rather than hardened, and Maya felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Well then, let's get you both settled," Diane said, leading them to a booth near the window. "Can I start you with some coffee?" "Please," Robert said, settling into the booth with the careful movements of someone still adjusting to navigating the world without sight. "Maya?" Maya nodded, then realized he couldn't see the gesture. "Yes, please. Thank you." Diane poured 2 steaming mugs of coffee and set them down, along with small containers of cream and sugar. "I'll give you a few minutes to look at the menu," she said, then headed back to the counter. Maya stared at the laminated menu, her stomach clenching as she read the prices. Even the cheapest items cost more than she usually spent on food in 2 days. She glanced across the table at Robert, who sat with his hands wrapped around his coffee mug, his face peaceful but distant. "Order whatever you'd like," he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Please. It would be my pleasure." Maya opened her mouth to protest, but Robert continued. "You saved my life this morning. The least I can do is buy you breakfast. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I find I enjoy eating more when I have company." There was something in his tone that made Maya think he was telling the truth about eating alone, and something else that suggested meals had become more of a necessity than a pleasure for him. She thought about her empty stomach and the granola bar that was supposed to be her breakfast, and made a decision. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." When Diane returned, Maya ordered the smallest item on the menu, a short stack of pancakes, while Robert asked for eggs Benedict and hash browns. As they waited for their food, Robert leaned back in the booth and seemed to study Maya's face with those sightless blue eyes. "Tell me about yourself, Maya," he said. "Are you a student?" The question was casual, but Maya heard the careful way it was phrased, leaving room for whatever answer she chose to give. She took a sip of coffee, buying time to decide how much truth to share. "I finished high school early," she said, which was technically true. She had earned her GED through a program for kids in foster care, though she had never walked across a graduation stage or thrown a cap in the air. "I'm kind of between things right now." Robert nodded as if this made perfect sense. "I understand the feeling. I'm between things myself." Diane brought their food, setting down plates that made Maya's mouth water despite her nervousness. The pancakes were golden and fluffy, served with real butter and warm syrup, the kind of breakfast she remembered from her early childhood before everything had fallen apart. Robert's eggs Benedict looked equally impressive, the hollandaise sauce perfectly yellow and rich. "This looks amazing," Maya said, cutting into her pancakes. The first bite was everything she had hoped, sweet and comforting, and filling in a way that went beyond mere nutrition. Robert ate slowly, with the careful movements of someone still learning to navigate a meal without sight, but he seemed to be enjoying his food. "Diane is an exceptional cook," he said. "I've been coming here regularly since I moved to Seattle. She has a gift for making people feel at home." As they ate, conversation flowed more easily. Robert asked about Maya's impressions of Seattle, and she found herself talking about the city's neighborhoods and hidden corners, with the knowledge of someone who had explored it on foot. Robert shared observations about the sounds and smells that had become his primary ways of understanding his new environment, painting a picture of the city that was entirely different from Maya's visual perspective, but no less vivid. "The waterfront has its own particular smell," he said, cutting another bite of eggs. "Salt and fish, of course, but also something else. Wood and tar from the old piers, maybe? And the sound of the ferries, that low horn that carries across the water. It's quite beautiful, actually." Maya nodded, thinking about the times she had walked down to Elliott Bay when she needed to feel less trapped by the city's buildings and crowds. I like watching the sunset from there, she said. When it's clear, you can see the Olympics across the water. I remember sunsets, Robert said quietly, and something in his voice made Maya look at him more carefully. I lost my sight 6 months ago. An accident. The simple statement hung between them, loaded with implications Maya could only imagine. She wanted to ask what kind of accident, when, how he was coping, but something in his posture told her he wasn't ready for those questions. I'm sorry, she said instead. Robert's smile was sad but genuine. Thank you. It's been an adjustment. Moving here was part of starting over, learning to live differently. He paused, seemingly debating whether to continue. I had a very different life before. Sometimes I think losing my sight was just the final push I needed to leave it behind. Maya finished her pancakes, savoring the last bites while processing what Robert had said. There were layers to his story that she couldn't quite grasp, hints of a past that didn't match his current circumstances. The way he carried himself, his manner of speaking, even his knowledge of the city's restaurants suggested someone who had once moved in very different circles. What did you do before? She asked carefully. Robert was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug. I was in business. Corporate acquisitions mostly. I spent my days buying and selling companies, making deals that moved numbers around on spreadsheets. His voice carried a weight of distaste that surprised Maya. I thought it was very important. And now? Now I'm learning what's actually important. He looked up, his sightless eyes somehow finding hers across the table. Like the kindness of strangers, like sharing a meal with someone who has the courage to risk her own safety for a person she's never met. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't that big a deal. It was to me. Robert reached across the table, his hand finding hers with surprising accuracy. His skin was warm and soft, and Maya noticed again the small scars across his knuckles. Maya, may I ask you something? She nodded, then remembered. Yes. Where do you live? The question she had been dreading, asked with such gentle directness that she couldn't deflect it. Maya pulled her hand back, wrapping both around her coffee mug for warmth and comfort. It's complicated, she said. Are you homeless? The word hung in the air between them, stark and unavoidable. Maya had grown to hate it, the way it reduced her entire existence to a single status, the way it made people look at her differently once they knew. But Robert's voice held no judgment, only concern. Yeah, she said quietly. I am. Robert was silent for a moment, and Maya braced herself for the usual responses. Questions about why she wasn't in school, suggestions about shelters and social services, maybe even an offer to call someone who could help. Instead, he simply nodded. How long? 8 months. Since I aged out of foster care. That's a hard way to live. Maya looked up, surprised by the simplicity of his response. I manage. I'm sure you do. But managing and thriving are different things. Robert leaned forward slightly. Maya, I have a proposition for you. Here it comes, Maya thought. The offer with strings attached, the help that would come with conditions and expectations, and ultimately more trouble than it was worth. She had heard variations of this conversation before. I live alone in a small apartment near the waterfront, Robert continued. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry and has a couch that makes into a bed. I could use help with some daily tasks. Things that have become difficult since I lost my sight. Shopping, organizing, reading mail. In exchange, you would have a place to stay and regular meals. Maya stared at him, processing the offer. You want me to be your caretaker? I want you to be my friend, Robert said simply. Someone who can help me navigate this new life. And maybe let me help you in return. The offer was tempting beyond words. A warm, dry place to sleep, regular meals, the possibility of stability for the first time in 8 months. But Maya had learned to be suspicious of generosity, especially from men she barely knew. Why would you do that? She asked. You don't know anything about me. Robert smiled. I know you're brave enough to save a stranger's life. I know you're proud enough to refuse money when you clearly need it. I know you're smart enough to survive 8 months on the streets of a major city. And I know you're kind enough to spend your morning helping a blind man find his way to breakfast. He paused. That tells me quite a lot about who you are. Maya considered his words, part of her desperately wanting to say yes, while another part warned her to be careful. What if it doesn't work out? What if you decide you don't want me around? Then you leave, and you're no worse off than you are now. Robert's voice was steady, reassuring. But Maya, I think it will work out. I think we might be exactly what each other needs. Diane approached their table, coffee pot in hand. More coffee? She asked, but her eyes were on Maya, reading the tension in her posture with the intuition of someone who had spent years observing human drama play out in her diner. Please, Robert said, and Diane refilled both their mugs. As Diane walked away, Maya made her decision. Maybe it was the warmth of the diner, or the memory of sleeping on cardboard the night before, or something in Robert's voice that suggested he understood what it meant to start over. Maybe it was simply that she was tired of being alone. Okay, she said. I'll try it. Robert's smile was radiant. Wonderful. We can go to my apartment after breakfast. Let you get settled. He paused. There's just one thing I should mention. I have very few possessions, and the apartment is quite small. I hope you won't be disappointed. Maya almost laughed. After 8 months of sleeping rough, the idea of being disappointed by a roof and 4 walls seemed absurd. I think I can manage. They finished their breakfast in comfortable conversation, Robert telling Maya about the neighborhood where he lived, and Maya sharing some of her knowledge about navigating Seattle's bus system. As they prepared to leave, Robert insisted on paying for both meals, leaving Diane a generous tip that made the older woman beam. You take care of yourself, honey, Diane said to Maya as they gathered their coats. And you bring her back soon, Robert. I like seeing you with company. The walk to Robert's apartment took them through several neighborhoods, each with its own character and challenges. Maya found herself naturally falling into the role of guide, describing potential obstacles and changes in the terrain. Robert navigated with increasing confidence, his cane work becoming more fluid as they walked. You're very good at this, Maya observed, as they waited for a light to change. I've had excellent instruction, Robert replied. There's a center for the visually impaired downtown that offers mobility training. I spent 2 months learning to use the cane properly, how to navigate stairs and traffic, basic survival skills. His tone was matter-of-fact, but Maya detected undercurrents of frustration and determination. It's remarkable how much you take for granted until you can't do it anymore. They turned out a quieter street, lined with older apartment buildings, most of them showing their age, but maintained with obvious care. Children's toys scattered across small front yards, and the smell of someone's lunch drifted from an open window. It was a working-class neighborhood, comfortable but not wealthy, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and looked out for each other. This is it, Robert said, stopping in front of a 3-story brick building with a small garden in front. The building was older but well-kept, with painted trim and clean windows. 3rd floor. Maya looked up at the building, trying to imagine what Robert's apartment might look like. Based on his clothes and manner, she had expected something more upscale, but this neighborhood felt more honest somehow, more real than the gleaming towers downtown. The lobby was small but clean, with mailboxes along one wall and a narrow staircase leading up. Robert navigated the stairs with practiced ease, his cane folding as he gripped the handrail. Maya followed, noting how he counted steps and used landmarks to orient himself. 32 steps to my floor, he said, as they reached the 3rd level. I've become very good at counting. Robert's apartment was at the end of the hall, and he unlocked the door with the confident movements of someone who had adapted his routines to accommodate his changed circumstances. He stepped inside and gestured for Maya to follow. The apartment took Maya's breath away, not because of its luxury, but because of its unexpected simplicity. The main room was small, but flooded with light from large windows that faced west toward the sound. The furniture was minimal but well-chosen. A comfortable sofa, a small dining table with 2 chairs, a few carefully placed lamps. The walls were mostly bare, with only a handful of photographs in simple frames. What struck Maya most was what wasn't there. No television, no computer, No collections of books or knickknacks. None of the accumulated possessions that most people use to define their living spaces. It felt less like someone's home than a very comfortable hotel room, clean and functional, but strangely impersonal. "It's not much," Robert said, hanging his coat on a hook by the door. "But it serves my needs." Maya walked to the windows, looking out over the neighborhood toward the distant shimmer of Elliott Bay. "The view is incredible." "I'm told it is," Robert said with a slight smile. "I chose this place partly for that. Even if I can't see it, I like knowing it's there." The kitchen was compact but complete, with a small refrigerator and a stove that looked rarely used. Maya opened a few cabinets, finding them mostly empty except for basic dishes and a few canned goods. "I don't cook much anymore," Robert admitted, following her voice. "Cooking was always something I did for others, and eating alone lost its appeal. I've been surviving mostly on takeout and the occasional meal at Murphy's." Maya nodded, understanding more than he probably realized. Cooking for one person had always seemed pointless to her too, though in her case, it was more about lack of facilities than lack of motivation. The idea of having a real kitchen, even a small one, was almost overwhelming. "The couch opens into a bed," Robert continued, demonstrating the mechanism. "It's actually quite comfortable. The bathroom is through that door, and there are clean sheets and towels in the closet." Maya sat on the edge of the sofa bed, testing its firmness. After months of cardboard and concrete, it felt like the height of luxury. "This is really nice," she said, meaning it. Robert settled into the room's single armchair, his hands resting on the arms with careful precision. "Maya, I want you to understand something. This arrangement works only if we're both comfortable with it. If you want to leave at any time, for any reason, you're free to go. No questions, no judgment." Maya nodded, though she realized he couldn't see the gesture. "I understand." "Good. And I hope you'll feel free to speak up if anything doesn't feel right. I'm still learning how to live this way, and I don't want to make assumptions about what you need or want." "Want?" They spent the rest of the day getting Maya settled and establishing routines. Robert showed her how to operate the appliances, where to find cleaning supplies, how to sort the mail that accumulated by his door. Maya helped him organize his closet, reading labels and describing the condition of various items. It was simple work, but it felt good to be useful, to have a purpose beyond mere survival. As evening approached, Robert suggested they walk to a nearby grocery store to stock up on food. Maya found herself taking charge of the shopping list, asking Robert about his preferences and dietary restrictions while mentally calculating costs and nutritional value. It had been months since she had been able to plan meals in advance, and the simple act of choosing ingredients felt almost decadent. At the store, Maya naturally fell into the role of Robert's eyes, describing products and reading labels while he made decisions. Other shoppers occasionally stared, and Maya found herself becoming protective, ready to challenge anyone who looked at Robert with pity or condescension. But most people were simply curious or helpful, and several offered assistance that Robert accepted gracefully. "People are generally kind," he observed as they walked home with their groceries. "I was surprised by that, actually. I think I had become cynical about human nature." Maya thought about her own experiences with strangers over the past 8 months, the mixture of kindness and indifference and occasional cruelty she had encountered. "Some people are," she agreed. "You just have to learn to tell the difference." That evening, Maya cooked their first meal together, a simple pasta dish with vegetables and cheese. Robert sat at the small dining table, listening to the sounds from the kitchen and offering occasional suggestions. Maya found herself enjoying the process, the familiar rhythm of chopping and sautéing, the satisfaction of creating something nourishing from simple ingredients. "It smells wonderful," Robert said as she set plates on the table. I had forgotten how much I missed the smell of home cooking. They ate by the light of a single lamp, conversation flowing easily between them. Robert asked about Maya's experiences in foster care, and she found herself sharing more than she had intended, describing the series of homes and families that had never quite worked out, the caseworkers who meant well but couldn't fix the fundamental problem of being unwanted. In return, Robert began to open up about his own past, though his revelations came in careful pieces. He spoke about losing his wife and daughter in a car accident 2 years earlier, the devastating guilt that had consumed him afterward, the way his previous life had ceased to have meaning in the face of such loss. "I was driving," he said quietly, staring down at his untouched food. "We were coming back from dinner, celebrating our anniversary. It was raining, and I was tired, and I made a mistake. Just one small mistake, but it cost me everything." Maya reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "I'm so sorry." Robert turned his hand palm up, grasping her fingers gently. "The blindness came later, complications from the injuries I sustained in the crash. By the time I lost my sight, I had already lost everything else that mattered. In a strange way, it felt appropriate." "What do you mean?" "I spent the year after the accident trying to go back to my old life, pretending that work and success and accumulating wealth still mattered. But I couldn't see the point anymore. When I lost my sight, it felt like the universe was telling me to stop pretending." He squeezed her hand gently. "So I gave it all away. The business, the penthouse, most of my possessions. I kept enough to live simply, and I came here to start over." Maya stared at him, processing this revelation. "You gave it all away?" "Every last dollar of it. There are now several very well-funded charities that will never know where their donations came from." Robert's smile was sad but peaceful. "I discovered that having less made me feel more free, not less." The weight of what he was telling her began to sink in. Robert hadn't just been wealthy, he had been extraordinarily wealthy, the kind of rich that most people could barely imagine. And he had walked away from all of it, choosing instead to live in a small apartment and eat at neighborhood diners. "Do you regret it?" Maya asked. Robert considered the question carefully. "I regret the accident. I regret not being able to save my family. I regret the years I spent caring more about profit margins than the people in my life." He paused. "But giving away the money?" "No. That was the first decision I made after the accident that felt completely right." They finished dinner in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Maya helped Robert clear the dishes, learning the system he had developed for organizing his kitchen. As they worked together, she found herself thinking about the strange turns life could take, how two people from completely different worlds could end up needing exactly what the other had to offer. Later, as Maya made up the sofa bed and Robert prepared for sleep in his bedroom, she reflected on the day's extraordinary events. 12 hours earlier, she had been sleeping under a bridge, scrounging for food and trying to stay warm. Now, she was in a comfortable apartment, her stomach full, and her immediate future secure, at least temporarily. But more than the physical comfort, she was struck by something else. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt seen. Not as a problem to be solved or a statistic to be managed, but as a person worthy of kindness and respect. Robert had looked past her circumstances to see who she really was, and that recognition felt more valuable than any charity or government assistance. "Maya?" Robert's voice came from his bedroom doorway. "Yes. Thank you. For today. For staying. For giving this a chance. I haven't felt this hopeful about anything in a very long time." Maya smiled into the darkness. "Thank you, too. For breakfast, for this place, for treating me like I matter." "You do matter," Robert said firmly. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." As Maya settled into the surprisingly comfortable sofa bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the apartment building around her, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone with no other options, but real hope, the kind that came from believing that tomorrow might actually be better than today. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Maya would wake early, often before Robert, and start coffee in the small kitchen. She had always been an early riser, a habit developed during her years in foster care, where getting up first meant having the bathroom to herself and sometimes finding leftover food that wouldn't be there later. But now her early mornings were peaceful rather than strategic, time to think and plan rather than simply survive. Robert usually woke to the smell of coffee and whatever simple breakfast Maya had prepared. She had quickly learned his preferences, how he liked his eggs scrambled rather than fried, how he took his coffee black but appreciated a piece of toast with real butter. These small preferences, learned and remembered, felt like the building blocks of genuine friendship. Their days took on structure that benefited both of them. Maya would read Robert's mail, helping him sort through bills and correspondence, describing any documents that required his attention. She learned to read his handwriting, helping him maintain contact with the few people from his old life who still mattered to him. In return, Robert encouraged Maya to pursue her education, suggesting online courses and community college programs that could help her build toward a more secure future. "You're too intelligent to waste your potential," he said one morning as they reviewed course catalogs together. "Education is the one thing no one can take away from you once you have it." Maya had always been a good student when circumstances allowed, but stability had been rare enough in her life that completing any long-term program had seemed impossible. Now, with the security of a place to live and someone who believed in her abilities, she began to see possibilities she had never dared consider. They established other routines as well. Daily walks through the neighborhood, with Maya describing the changing seasons and Robert navigating with increasing confidence. Weekly grocery shopping trips that became small adventures, opportunities to explore different markets and discover new foods. Evening meals that Robert had begun to look forward to again, the simple pleasure of sharing food and conversation with someone who cared about his day. Maya also took on responsibilities that Robert hadn't explicitly asked for, but clearly needed. She organized his medications, ensuring he took them at the right times and in the correct doses. She maintained the apartment with a thoroughness born from appreciating having a real home to care for. She became his advocate in situations where his blindness made others treat him with condescension or impatience, her fierce protectiveness surprising them both. "You don't have to fight my battles for me," Robert said after Maya had confronted a rude clerk at the bank who had spoken to Robert as if he were mentally impaired rather than simply blind. "I know," Maya replied, "but I want to. You're my friend, and friends look out for each other." The word hung between them, simple but profound. Friend. Maya had had very few real friends in her life, and none as an adult. Robert had lost most of his friendships along with everything else when he had walked away from his former life. The relationship they were building was different from anything either had experienced, born from mutual need, but growing into genuine affection and respect. One evening, about a month after Maya had moved in, Robert made an announcement that surprised her. "I've been thinking about getting a job," he said as they sat at their small dining table, picking at the chicken stir-fry Maya had prepared. "Something part-time, maybe working with other people who are adjusting to vision loss." Maya looked up from her plate, studying Robert's face. In the weeks they had lived together, she had watched him transform from someone who moved through the world with careful hesitation to someone who navigated with growing confidence. His shoulders were straighter, his voice stronger, and he smiled more often. "You don't need to work," Maya said carefully. "I mean, financially." Robert nodded. "That's true, but I'm discovering that I need to work for other reasons. I need to feel useful, to contribute something meaningful." He set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. "For too many years, my work was about accumulating wealth for its own sake. Now I want to do something that actually helps people." Maya understood the feeling more than she could express. The past month of having real responsibilities, of being needed and appreciated, had awakened something in her that had been dormant since childhood. The feeling of having a purpose beyond mere survival. "What kind of job?" she asked. "There's a nonprofit downtown that provides support services for people who are newly blind or visually impaired. Mobility training, technology instruction, emotional support." Robert's voice grew more animated as he spoke. "They need someone with business experience to help with their operations, and they're specifically interested in hiring people who understand the challenges their clients face." Maya smiled, recognizing the spark in Robert's voice that appeared whenever he talked about something that truly interested him. "That sounds perfect for you." "I hope so. I have an interview next week." Robert reached across the table, finding Maya's hand with the accuracy that still sometimes surprised her. "I was hoping you might come with me. Not to the interview itself, but to help me navigate getting there. Maybe explore the neighborhood a bit." "Of course," Maya said without hesitation. Over the past month, she had become Robert's primary guide to the world beyond their apartment, a role she had grown to enjoy. It felt good to be the one with knowledge and skills that someone else needed. The following Tuesday, they took the bus downtown to the offices of Vision Forward, the nonprofit where Robert was interviewing. Maya had researched the organization online, learning about their programs and services, their success stories and funding challenges. She wanted to be prepared to help Robert present himself in the best possible light. The building housing Vision Forward was older but well-maintained, with clear signage and accessibility features that spoke to the organization's mission. Maya described the lobby's layout to Robert as they waited, noting the tactile strips on the floor that would help visually impaired visitors navigate independently. "Robert Chen?" A woman's voice called from across the lobby. Maya looked up to see a professional-looking woman in her 40s approaching them, her expression warm and welcoming. "That's me," Robert said, standing and extending his hand. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, the executive director. It's wonderful to meet you in person." Jennifer's handshake was firm and confident. Her eyes briefly met Maya's, a question in her expression. "This is Maya," Robert said, sensing the unspoken inquiry. "She helps me navigate the city. Maya, Jennifer Walsh." Maya shook Jennifer's offered hand, noting the genuine warmth in the older woman's expression. "Nice to meet you. Maya, there's a coffee shop across the street if you'd like to wait there," Jennifer suggested. "This shouldn't take more than an hour." Maya squeezed Robert's arm gently. "Good luck," she whispered, then watched as Jennifer led him toward the elevators. The coffee shop was small and crowded, filled with the lunch rush of downtown office workers. Maya ordered a small coffee and found a table by the window where she could watch the building across the street. As she waited, she thought about how much their lives had changed in just a few weeks. Robert's transformation had been remarkable to witness. The careful, hesitant man she had saved from the truck had evolved into someone who moved through the world with purpose and confidence. But Maya was beginning to realize that her own transformation had been just as dramatic. Living with Robert had given her not just stability, but a sense of self-worth she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, someone depended on her not out of desperation or last resort, but because they valued her abilities and trusted her judgment. Robert asked for her opinions on everything from what to wear to important decisions about his future. He listened to her ideas and took them seriously, treating her as an equal despite the differences in their age and experience. Maya had also started taking college courses online, using Robert's computer and internet connection to access classes in business administration and social work. Her grades were excellent, and her professors had begun to take notice of her thoughtful contributions to class discussions. For the first time, she was beginning to see a future that extended beyond mere survival. An hour later, Maya saw Robert and Jennifer emerge from the building across the street. Even from a distance, she could read the happiness in Robert's posture, the way he carried himself with obvious satisfaction. "How did it go?" Maya asked as Robert approached her table. Robert's smile was radiant. "I got the job. Part-time program coordinator, working with newly blind clients to help them develop independent living skills." He settled into the chair across from her, his excitement palpable. "Jennifer said my business background combined with my personal experience makes me exactly what they're looking for." Maya felt a surge of pride that surprised her with its intensity. "That's wonderful. When do you start?" "Next Monday. 3 days a week to begin with the possibility of expanding if things go well." Robert leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "Maya, there's something else. Jennifer mentioned that they're always looking for volunteers, people who can provide peer support and practical assistance to their clients. She suggested that you might be interested." Maya blinked, processing this unexpected development. "Me? But I'm not qualified for anything like that." "That's where you're wrong," Robert said firmly. "You have qualities that can't be taught in any training program. You understand what it means to navigate difficult circumstances, to be resourceful and resilient. You know how to help people maintain their dignity when they're facing challenges." He paused, his sightless eyes seeming to look directly into hers. "You saved my life, Maya, and not just from that truck. You gave me a reason to believe that my future could be meaningful again." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. overwhelmed by the sincerity in Robert's voice. "I didn't do anything special." "You did everything special," Robert replied. "And Jennifer could see it too. She asked about you specifically, wanted to know if you might be interested in getting involved with their programs." That evening, as they shared dinner and talked about Robert's new job, Maya found herself considering possibilities she had never imagined. The idea of working with people facing major life challenges appealed to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Maybe it was because she understood what it felt like to have the world suddenly become inhospitable, to need help while wanting to maintain independence and dignity. "Tell me more about what volunteers do," Maya said, as she served Robert a second helping of the casserole she had prepared. Robert described the various programs Vision Forward offered, from basic mobility training to support groups for family members of visually impaired individuals. Volunteers helped with everything from transportation to administrative tasks, to simply providing emotional support for people adjusting to major changes in their lives. "There's also an educational component," Robert continued. "Many of our clients are dealing with vision loss later in life, after they've already established careers and families. They need practical help learning new ways to do familiar tasks. But they also need hope that their lives can still be full and meaningful." Maya nodded, understanding the importance of hope from her own experience. The past month with Robert had shown her how powerful it could be to have someone believe in your potential, to see possibilities rather than limitations. "I'd like to try it," she said finally. "Maybe start small. See how it goes." Robert's smile lit up his entire face. "I was hoping you'd say that." The next few months brought changes that transformed both their lives in ways neither had anticipated. Robert threw himself into his new role at Vision Forward with enthusiasm that reminded Maya why he had been successful in business. His natural leadership abilities, combined with his personal understanding of vision loss, made him exceptionally effective at helping clients develop confidence and independence. Maya began volunteering 2 days a week, initially helping with basic administrative tasks, but gradually taking on more responsibility. She discovered she had a gift for working with teenagers and young adults who were dealing with vision loss, perhaps because her own experience with life's unpredictability made her less likely to offer false reassurances or buy empty platitudes. "You don't pretend everything's going to be easy," said Marcus, a 19-year-old who had lost his sight in a motorcycle accident. "That makes it easier to believe you when you say things can get better." Maya's work at Vision Forward led to other opportunities. Jennifer recommended her for a scholarship program for non-traditional students, which allowed her to increase her course load and focus on completing her bachelor's degree. Her grades continued to be excellent, and several professors encouraged her to consider graduate school in social work or counseling. But perhaps the most significant change was in Maya and Robert's relationship itself. What had begun as a practical arrangement between strangers had evolved into something deeper and more complex. They had become family, in the truest sense of the word, people who chose to care for each other not because of blood or obligation, but because of genuine affection and mutual respect. "I need to tell you something," Robert said one evening as they sat in their small living room, Maya reading aloud from a novel they were both enjoying. It was a ritual they had developed, her voice bringing stories to life for both of them in the soft lamplight of their shared space. Maya closed the book and looked at him, noting something serious in his tone. "What is it?" Robert was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on the arms of his chair in the careful way that meant he was organizing his thoughts. "I've been thinking about my family, about Sarah and Emma." Maya knew these names, though Robert rarely spoke about his wife and daughter. She had learned their stories in pieces over the months they had lived together, fragments of memory that Robert shared when grief wasn't too heavy to bear. "What about them?" Maya asked gently. "I've been carrying guilt about their deaths for 2 years now. Guilt about the accident, about not being able to save them, about somehow being the one who survived." Robert's voice was steady, but weighted with old pain. "But, lately, I've been thinking about what they would want from me now." Maya waited, understanding that sometimes the most important conversations required patience. "Sarah always said that life was meant to be lived fully, that hiding from possibility was the greatest waste of the gift we'd been given." Robert smiled, though tears tracked down his cheeks. "And Emma," She was only 8, but she had this incredible capacity for joy. She found wonder in everything, from the way snow fell to the sound of birds singing. Maya felt her own eyes filling with tears, moved by the love in Robert's voice when he spoke about his lost family. "I think they would be happy that I found you," Robert continued. "Not happy that I needed saving, but happy that someone like you existed in the world. Someone brave enough and kind enough to save a stranger, and generous enough to build a life with him afterward." Maya reached for Robert's hand, finding it already extended toward her. "I think they'd be proud of the person you've become, the work you're doing, the way you've learned to help others. And I think they'd love you," Robert said simply. "The way I've come to love you. Not as a replacement for them, but as someone entirely your own, someone who brought light back into my life when I thought it was gone forever." The words hung in the air between them, simple but profound. Love. Not romantic love, but something deeper and more lasting. The love of people who had chosen each other as family, who had built something meaningful from the most unlikely beginnings. "I love you too," Maya said, meaning it completely. "You saved my life too, you know. Maybe not from a truck, but from something worse. From believing I didn't matter, that I had nothing valuable to offer." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands clasped, both lost in their own thoughts about the strange paths that had brought them together. Outside their windows, Seattle continued its endless rhythm of rain and commerce and human drama, but inside their small apartment, two people who had found each other against all odds simply appreciated the miracle of their connection. A year later, Maya stood at the podium in Vision Forward's conference room, looking out at an audience of clients, staff, and volunteers who had gathered for the organization's annual recognition dinner. She wore a simple but elegant dress that Robert had helped her choose, her hair styled professionally for the occasion. In her hands, she held the speech she had been working on for weeks, though she no longer needed to read from it. "When I first came to Vision Forward," she began, her voice clear and confident, "I thought I was here to help other people. What I discovered was that helping others was actually helping me find my own path, my own purpose, my own voice." In the audience, Robert sat at a front table, his face glowing with pride as he listened to Maya accept the organization's Volunteer of the Year award. Beside him sat Jennifer and several other staff members, all of them beaming as Maya described her journey, from homeless teenager to college graduate to respected advocate for people facing life transitions. "I learned that sometimes the most broken people have the most to offer," Maya continued, "because they understand that healing is possible, that transformation is real, that hope is not just a pretty word, but a practical tool for building a better life." Maya's eyes found Robert in the audience, and she smiled, remembering the morning when she had saved him from a truck and he had saved her from despair. "I learned that family isn't just about blood or legal documents. It's about people who choose to show up for each other, day after day, in small ways and large ones." As applause filled the room, Maya thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She was 22 now, a college graduate with a full-time job as a program coordinator at Vision Forward. She had her own small apartment, though she still had dinner with Robert several times a week. She had friends, colleagues, a future full of possibilities she was still discovering. But more than any of that, she had learned something that no college course or job training could teach. She had learned that every person carries the potential to transform not just their own life, but the lives of others, that kindness is not weakness, but the strongest force in the human experience, that love comes in many forms, and all of them matter. After the ceremony, as Maya and Robert walked slowly through the Seattle evening toward the bus stop that would take them home, Maya reflected on how much had changed since that morning when she had pulled him back from the edge of the crosswalk. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't seen that truck?" she asked. Robert considered the question seriously, as he did most things. "I think about it sometimes," he said. "But then I realize that asking what if about the good things in life is pointless. We found each other, we helped each other, we built something beautiful together. That's what matters." Maya nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words. The past couldn't be changed, and the future couldn't be predicted, but the present moment was full of possibility, for anyone brave enough to reach for it. As they waited for their bus, Maya watched the evening commuters hurrying past, each lost in their own struggles and dreams and fears. She wondered how many of them were one small act of kindness away from a completely different life. How many were carrying burdens that could be lightened by someone who cared enough to notice. "Robert?" she said as their bus approached. "Yes? Thank you for seeing who I could become instead of just who I was." Robert smiled, his sightless eyes somehow finding hers in the gathering darkness. "Thank you for showing me that starting over isn't about going back to who you used to be. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be." The bus pulled up with a hiss of brakes and hydraulics, and Maya helped Robert navigate the steps, their routine as smooth and comfortable as everything else in their shared life. As they settled into their seats for the ride home, Maya looked out the window at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance and felt a deep sense of gratitude for the random moment that had brought them together. Sometimes salvation came in the form of dramatic rescues and life-changing revelations. But more often, Maya had learned, it came in the form of small kindnesses, daily choices to care for each other, the patient work of building trust and love, one conversation at a time. She had saved Robert from a truck, and he had saved her from a life without hope. But the real miracle wasn't in those single moments of rescue. The real miracle was in everything that came after, the slow and careful construction of a life worth living, built by two people who had decided that they mattered to each other and to the world. As the bus carried them through the Seattle night toward home, Maya closed her eyes and smiled, thinking about tomorrow's possibilities and all the tomorrows that would follow. She had learned that the future wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you created through your choices, your relationships, your willingness to believe that better days were always possible. And in that belief, that stubborn insistence on hope in the face of uncertainty, Maya had found not just a new life, but a new understanding of what it meant to be truly alive. The homeless girl who had once slept under bridges had become a woman who helped others find their way home, and the journey from one to the other had been paved with small acts of courage, kindness, and love. The truck that had nearly claimed Robert's life that morning had instead delivered them both to a future neither could have imagined. A future built on the simple truth that sometimes the most important thing you can do is pay attention to the people around you and be ready to act when someone needs help. Maya Rodriguez and Robert Chen had found each other in a moment of crisis and built a life together in the aftermath. Their story was proof that families come in all forms, that healing is always possible, and that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect, approaching from directions we never thought to look. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 3 years passed, and Maya found herself standing in the lobby of a gleaming office building in downtown Seattle, adjusting the collar of her navy blazer as she waited for the elevator. At 25, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every opportunity through determination and hard work. The scared teenager who had once slept under bridges seemed like a distant memory, though Maya never forgot where she had come from. The elevator doors opened, revealing a familiar figure. "Maya Rodriguez," said a warm voice. "Right on time, as always." Dr. Patricia Winters stepped out of the elevator, extending her hand with the professional warmth that had made her one of Seattle's most respected philanthropists. Patricia had been following Maya's work at Vision Forward for over a year, impressed by the innovative programs Maya had developed for young people transitioning out of difficult circumstances. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Maya said, shaking Patricia's hand. "Though I have to admit, I'm curious about why you wanted to discuss this, away from Vision Forward." Patricia smiled mysteriously. "All will become clear. Shall we head up to my office?" The elevator carried them to the 32nd floor, where Patricia's foundation occupied an entire level of the building. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Maya could see Elliott Bay stretching toward the Olympic Mountains, the same view she had learned to love from Robert's much humbler apartment. Patricia's office was impressive but not ostentatious, filled with photographs of the people and communities her foundation had helped over the years. Maya recognized some of the faces from local news stories about education initiatives and housing programs, evidence of Patricia's commitment to addressing systemic problems rather than just treating symptoms. Coffee? Patricia offered, gesturing toward a small seating area with comfortable chairs and a low table. Please, Maya said, settling into one of the chairs and trying to guess what this meeting might be about. Patricia had been deliberately vague in her invitation, mentioning only that she had a proposition that might interest Maya. As Patricia prepared their coffee, Maya thought about how much her life had changed since accepting Robert's offer to share his apartment. She now held a master's degree in social work, funded by scholarships and her own careful savings from her job at Vision Forward. Her thesis had focused on innovative approaches to supporting young adults aging out of foster care, drawing on both research and her own experiences to propose new models of community-based support. Maya, Patricia said, handing her a steaming mug and settling into the opposite chair. I've been watching your work for some time now. The programs you've developed at Vision Forward have caught the attention of people throughout the nonprofit sector. Maya felt a flush of pride but tried to remain modest. I had excellent mentors and a supportive environment. Robert Chen, my colleague and friend, has been instrumental in everything I've accomplished. Yes, Robert, Patricia nodded. I've heard wonderful things about his transformation and the work you've done together. But today, I want to talk about your future, specifically about an opportunity that could allow you to expand your impact significantly. Patricia leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. My foundation is launching a new initiative focused on supporting young people who are transitioning out of institutional care, foster care, juvenile justice, homeless services. We're looking for someone to lead this program, someone who understands both the challenges these young people face and the systems that are supposed to help them. Maya felt her heart rate quicken. That sounds incredible, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to lead something that large. On the contrary, Patricia said firmly, your combination of lived experience, formal education, and proven track record makes you uniquely qualified. We're not looking for someone who has always had advantages. We're looking for someone who understands what it takes to overcome disadvantages and can help others, quote, do the same. Patricia reached for a folder on the table between them and handed it to Maya. This is a preliminary proposal for the program. I'd like you to review it and tell me what you think. Maya opened the folder, her eyes widening as she read through the documents inside. The proposed program was ambitious beyond anything she had imagined, with funding for housing assistance, educational support, job training, and comprehensive case management for young people aging out of various systems. The budget alone was larger than Vision Forward's entire annual operating expenses. This is extraordinary, Maya said, looking up from the papers. But why me? Surely there are people with more experience in program management. Patricia smiled. Experience comes in many forms, Maya. Yes, there are people who have managed large programs, but very few who understand intimately what it feels like to need these services. Your perspective is invaluable, and your track record shows that you can translate that perspective into effective action. Maya continued reading, her excitement growing as she absorbed the details of what Patricia was proposing. The program would serve hundreds of young people each year, providing not just immediate support, but long-term mentorship and advocacy. It was everything Maya had dreamed of being able to offer when she worked with individual clients at Vision Forward. There's one more thing, Patricia said, watching Maya's expression carefully. We want this program to be based here in Seattle, but we also want it to serve as a model that can be replicated in other cities. If you agree to lead it, you would be developing something that could potentially help thousands of young people across the country. Maya set down the folder, overwhelmed by the scope of what Patricia was offering. When would you need an answer? Take your time, Patricia said. This is a big decision, and I want you to be completely certain it's what you want. Discuss it with Robert, with your mentors at Vision Forward, with anyone whose opinion you value. The only timeline I have is that we'd like to launch the program within the next 6 months. As Maya rode the bus home that evening, her mind raced with possibilities and concerns. The opportunity Patricia had presented was everything she had hoped to achieve in her career, but it also represented a significant leap from her current role. Leading a program of this magnitude would require skills and knowledge she wasn't sure she possessed. She found Robert in their shared apartment, though he now lived in a larger place, a few blocks away. They had maintained their tradition of cooking dinner together several times a week, a ritual that had become precious to both of them. Tonight, Robert was attempting to prepare a stir-fry, moving around the kitchen with the confidence he had developed over years of practice. "How did your mysterious meeting go?" Robert asked, not looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. His knife work had become remarkably precise, another skill developed through patient practice and determination. Maya hung her coat by the door and moved to help with dinner preparation, her mind still processing the afternoon's conversation. It was about a job opportunity. A big one. Robert paused in his chopping, turning toward the sound of her voice. "Tell me about it." As they cooked together, Maya described Patricia's proposal, watching Robert's expression change from curiosity to excitement to something that might have been concern. When she finished explaining, Robert was quiet for several minutes, stirring the vegetables with careful attention. "What are you thinking?" Maya asked. "I'm thinking that this is exactly the kind of opportunity you were meant for," Robert said finally. "And I'm thinking that I'm going to miss working with you every day." Maya felt a pang of sadness she hadn't expected. Over the past 3 years, Robert had become more than a friend or roommate. He was her chosen family, her closest confidant, the person who had believed in her potential when she couldn't see it herself. The idea of not seeing him daily at Vision Forward felt like losing an essential part of her life. "Maybe I shouldn't take it," Maya said impulsively. "Maybe what we have at Vision Forward is enough." Robert turned off the burner and faced her fully, his expression serious. "Maya Rodriguez, if you turn down this opportunity because you're worried about leaving me behind, I will never forgive you." His vehemence surprised her. "Robert, no, listen to me," Robert continued, his voice gentle but firm. 3 years ago, you saved my life, and then you helped me rebuild it into something meaningful. Now you have the chance to save hundreds of other lives, maybe thousands. You think I would want you to give that up?" Maya looked at Robert's face, seeing the mix of pride and sadness there, understanding that he was struggling with the same emotions she felt. They had built something beautiful together, but growth sometimes required difficult transitions. "Besides," Robert added with a smile, "who says you'd be leaving me behind? Patricia's program will need advisors, consultants, people with experience in vision rehabilitation and adaptive technologies. I might just find myself working with you again, in a different capacity." They finished preparing dinner in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about change and opportunity, and the nature of relationships that survive and thrive through transitions. As they sat down to eat, Maya realized that Robert was right. The foundation they had built together was strong enough to support whatever changes lay ahead. "I'm scared," Maya admitted, as they shared the meal Robert had prepared. "Good," Robert replied. "Fear means you understand how important this is. The Maya I met 3 years ago was brave enough to risk her life for a stranger. The Maya sitting across from me now is brave enough to risk everything she's built for the chance to help people she's never met." Over the following weeks, Maya threw herself into researching Patricia's proposal, talking with experts in youth services, visiting programs in other cities that were attempting similar work. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that this was not just an opportunity but a calling. She also spent considerable time with Robert, preparing for the transition in their working relationship. They developed plans for maintaining their friendship while respecting the boundaries that would come with Maya's new role. Robert had his own news to share. He had been offered a promotion to Director of Programs at Vision Forward, a role that would allow him to expand his impact while remaining connected to the work that had given his life new meaning. "We're both moving forward," Robert observed one evening as they walked along the waterfront, enjoying one of Seattle's rare sunny evenings. "It feels appropriate, somehow." Maya nodded, watching the ferries cross Elliott Bay as commuters made their way home to families and lives she could only imagine. "Do you think your wife and daughter would be proud of what you've become?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the seriousness he brought to discussions of his lost family. "I think they would be amazed," he said finally. "Not just by what I've accomplished, but by who I've become. The man they knew was successful, but not particularly wise. I've learned wisdom from loss, from you, from the people we've worked with. And I'd learned that home isn't a place, Maya replied. It's people who choose to love you and believe in you, even when you can't believe in yourself. On a crisp morning in October, Maya stood in the conference room of Patricia's foundation, looking out at a table full of people who would become her colleagues in the new program. Social workers, case managers, housing specialists, education coordinators, mental health professionals, all of them gathered to begin building something unprecedented in Seattle's approach to supporting young people. In transition. Before we begin our planning session, Maya said, standing at the head of the table with notes she had prepared but wouldn't need, I want to tell you why this work matters to me personally. She had debated whether to share her own story with this new team, ultimately deciding that authenticity would be more valuable than maintaining professional distance. As she spoke about her journey from homelessness to this moment, she watched the faces around the table, seeing recognition and respect rather than pity or condescension. I'm not sharing this because I think my experience makes me special, Maya concluded. I'm sharing it because I want you to know that every young person we work with has the potential for transformation that goes beyond anything we can imagine. Our job is not to fix them or save them. Our job is to provide support and opportunities while they save themselves. End quote. The room was quiet for a moment after she finished speaking, the weight of the responsibility they were undertaking settling over everyone present. Then one of the social workers, a woman named Carmen who had worked in foster care for over a decade, began to clap. Soon the entire room was applauding, not for Maya's story, but for the commitment they were all making to the work ahead. Over the following months, Maya threw herself into building the program with the same intensity she had once applied to survival. She worked long hours, traveled to other cities to learn from similar initiatives, and gradually assembled a team that shared her vision and passion. The work was challenging in ways she hadn't anticipated, requiring skills in budget management, staff supervision, and community relations that she had to learn quickly. But it was also deeply rewarding. The program's first clients were young people aging out of foster care, many of them carrying stories similar to Maya's own. Watching them navigate the transition to independence, knowing that they had support and advocacy that she had never received, filled Maya with a sense of purpose that made every difficult day worthwhile. Robert remained a constant presence in her life, though their relationship had evolved as both of their careers advanced. They still shared meals regularly, still talked through professional challenges and personal concerns, but there was a new equality in their dynamic. Maya was no longer the young woman who needed rescue. Robert was no longer the man learning to rebuild his life. They were equals now, each successful in their own right, each grateful for the foundation the other had provided. You've become exactly who I always knew you could be, Robert said one evening as they sat in Maya's new apartment, a spacious place with large windows and room for the books and artwork she had begun collecting. But more than that, you've become someone I never could have imagined. Maya smiled, understanding what he meant. The journey from that intersection where they had first met had led them both to places neither could have predicted, transformations that went far beyond their original circumstances. I've been thinking about writing a book, Maya said, the idea having been growing in her mind for weeks. About second chances, about how people find each other when they need it most, about how sometimes the person who saves you is someone you end up saving in return. Robert's face lit up with interest. That sounds like a story worth telling. I want to call it the space between survival and thriving, Maya continued. Because I think that's where real transformation happens. In that space where you've moved beyond just getting by but you're still figuring out what comes next. When do you start writing? Maya looked around her apartment, at the life she had built through hard work and determination, and the support of people who had believed in her potential. I think I already have. 2 years later, Maya stood at a podium in a packed auditorium at the University of Washington, looking out at an audience of social workers, policymakers, and advocates who had come to hear about the success of the program she had built. The initiative had exceeded every expectation, not just in the number of young people served, but in the measurable outcomes that demonstrated real impact. When we began this work 3 years ago, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system, we had theories about what might work, and hopes about what might be possible. What we've learned is that young people who age out of institutional care don't need to be saved. They need to be supported while they save, quote, themselves. In the audience, Robert sat with Patricia and Jennifer from Vision Forward, all of them beaming with pride as Maya presented data showing decreased rates of homelessness, increased educational attainment, and improved mental health outcomes among program participants. But beyond the statistics, Maya shared stories of individual transformation that brought tears to many eyes in the auditorium. Marcus Johnson aged out of foster care at 18 with no family support and nowhere to live, Maya said, clicking to a slide showing a young man in a graduation cap and gown. Today, he's a junior at Seattle University, studying social work so he can give back to the system that ultimately helped him succeed. He's also a peer mentor in our program, working with younger participants who are just beginning their own journeys toward independence. Maya clicked to another slide, showing a young woman with a bright smile standing next to a small business storefront. Keisha Williams spent 2 years homeless after aging out of care, cycling through temporary jobs and unstable housing. Through our program, she received not just an apartment and job training, but ongoing mentorship and advocacy. Last month, she opened her own catering, quote, business, and she's already hired 3 other program graduates as employees. The stories continued, each one a testament to the power of comprehensive support, combined with belief in young people's inherent potential. As Maya spoke, she thought about her own journey, how different her life might have been if such a program had existed when she needed it. The most important thing we've learned, Maya concluded, is that transformation is not something we do to people or for people. It's something we support people in doing for themselves. Our role is to provide the resources, opportunities, and advocacy that allow young people to write their own stories of success, end quote. The applause that followed was sustained and heartfelt, but Maya's attention was drawn to a familiar figure in the back of the auditorium. A young woman with short dark hair and clothes that spoke of careful budgeting was standing near the exit, her expression a mixture of hope and skepticism that Maya recognized from her own past. After the presentation ended, and Maya had answered questions from audience members, she made her way toward the back of the auditorium, hoping to catch the young woman before she left. But the area was empty, the doors already closing behind the last departing attendees. "Excuse me," called a voice from behind her. Maya turned to see the young woman approaching hesitantly, as if she might change her mind and flee at any moment. "Hi," Maya said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Maya Rodriguez." "I know," the young woman replied, shaking Maya's hand with a grip that was firm despite her obvious nervousness. "I'm Chen. I was wondering if I could talk to you about your program." Maya felt a familiar spark of recognition, not because she had met Alex before, but because she recognized something in the young woman's posture and expression that reminded her of herself years earlier. "Of course. Would you like to get coffee? There's a place nearby that's usually quiet." As they walked toward the coffee shop, Alex began to share her story. She was 22, had aged out of foster care 4 years earlier, and had been struggling to find stable housing and employment ever since. She had heard about Maya's program through a friend, but hadn't been sure it was real, or if she would qualify for services. "I've learned to be suspicious of programs that promise to help," Alex said, as they settled into a quiet corner of the coffee shop with their drinks. "Most of them have so many requirements and restrictions that they end up helping the people who need help least." Maya nodded, understanding the wariness that came from repeated disappointment with systems that were supposed to provide support. "What made you come to the presentation today?" Alex was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee with more attention than the task required. "I read an article about you online, about your background and how you started the program. I guess I wanted to see if it was real, if someone who had actually been through what I'm going through could really create something that worked." "And what do you think?" "I think maybe I'm ready to try trusting again," Alex said, looking up to meet Maya's eyes. "But I need to know what the catch is." "There's always a catch." Maya smiled, remembering asking Robert similar questions years earlier, her own suspicion of offers that seemed too good to be true. "The catch is that you have to be willing to accept help, which is harder than it sounds. The catch is that you have to be patient with the process, because real change takes time. The catch is that eventually, you'll probably want to help other people the way you've been helped, and that can be both rewarding and exhausting." End quote. Alex listened carefully, her expression gradually relaxing as Maya described the program's approach and philosophy. They talked for over an hour, Alex asking detailed questions about housing assistance, educational support, and job training opportunities. Maya answered each question honestly, including the limitations and challenges of what the program could provide. "When can I start?" Alex asked finally, her decision apparently made. "Monday morning, if you're ready," Maya replied. "We'll start with an intake assessment and begin working on immediate needs like housing and food security. Then we'll develop a longer-term plan based on your goals and interests." As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, Alex paused at the door. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't met Robert? If you'd had to keep figuring everything out on your own?" Maya considered the question, one she had asked herself many times over the years. "I think about it sometimes," she said finally. "But then I realize that asking what if about the good things in life misses the point. The important thing is that we found each other when we needed to, and that led to everything else." "But doesn't it scare you sometimes, how much your life depended on one random moment?" Maya understood the fear behind Alex's question, the anxiety that came from knowing how precarious stability could be. "It used to scare me," she admitted. "But now I think about it differently. Yes, my meeting Robert was random, but what happened after that wasn't random. We both made choices, day after day, to build something meaningful together. That's not luck, that's not luck. Determination." Alex nodded slowly, processing Maya's words. "I hope I can be as brave as you were." "You already are," Maya said firmly. Walking into that auditorium today, asking questions, deciding to try again after being disappointed before, that takes tremendous courage. You're already braver than you know. As Maya watched Alex walk away toward the bus stop, she felt the familiar mixture of hope and responsibility that came with meeting someone at the beginning of their journey toward stability. In Alex, she saw not just another program participant, but a reminder of her own transformation, evidence that change was always possible for people willing to reach for it. That evening, Maya called Robert to tell him about meeting Alex and about the successful presentation. They had maintained their tradition of sharing the significant moments in their lives, celebrating successes, and supporting each other through challenges. "She reminds me of someone I used to know," Maya said, settling into her favorite chair with a cup of tea and the satisfaction of a day well spent. "Smart, stubborn, and suspicious of help?" Robert asked with amusement in his voice. "Exactly. I think she's going to do well in the program once she learns to trust the process. And I think you've become exactly what you were meant to be," Robert said, his voice warm with affection and pride. "Someone who can see potential in people who can't see it in themselves." Maya smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a scared teenager sleeping under bridges to a respected professional helping others find their paths to stability, the transformation still sometimes seemed impossible to believe. But it was real, built through thousands of small choices and daily acts of courage, supported by people who had believed in her potential before she could see it herself. The program she had built would continue to grow and evolve, serving hundreds of young people each year and providing a model for similar initiatives in other cities. Her book, when she finally finished writing it, would reach thousands of readers who needed to hear that transformation was possible. But perhaps most importantly, she would continue to be living proof that circumstances don't determine destiny, that hope is always justified, and that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we end up saving in return. As she prepared for bed that night, Maya looked out her window at the Seattle skyline, thinking about all the people in the city who were struggling with challenges she understood intimately. Tomorrow, some of them would find their way to her program, ready to begin their own journeys toward stability and hope. And Maya would be there to support them, not as someone who had all the answers, but as someone who had learned that the most important questions were worth asking, that help was worth accepting, and that every person carried within themselves the potential for transformation beyond anything they could imagine. The work would continue, one person at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. And in that continuation, in that commitment to seeing possibility where others might see only problems, Maya had found not just a career but a calling, not just success but meaning, not just survival, but the kind of life worth living fully and sharing generously with others who were still learning to believe in their own potential for change.